Hello everyone, Just Gord here and welcome back to another Planet Zoo real life inspiration video. Today we are finally looking at the lions, long requested, but I was holding off until I saw the new lion enclosure at Artis. So it's in the video. We have over 30 habitats to look at and 2 rescues. Multiple enclosures in some zoos. We have African lions, white lions, Asiatic lions. Let's just get started because there's so much to see and we're gonna have to go through this pretty quickly to keep this a somewhat short video. So let's start right away with Dierenpark Amersfoort, where we have a beautiful area, the city of old. It's all about how animals interact with humans throughout history. So it's this historical setting. We have castles and gladiator type things, and we have a beautiful lion enclosure with lots of reverse habitat immersion. We can see this stone path going through the glass, even going into this hyena enclosure through the lion enclosures, so you can see the lions and hyenas kind of cross viewing each other, which is really quite cool. And yeah, here you can see how that path goes from the visitor area into the enclosure like that. Really awesome. And there's also this elevated point, as you could just see, from which you can have other views into the enclosure. Even more reverse habitat immersion over here with these stairs going through the glass. You can cross under the enclosure through this tunnel, which brings you to this kind of center point where you're in the middle of the enclosures, lions all around you, and the glass is really kind of randomly placed between these logs, making it look all very natural and interesting. And then there's this tower that you can climb up to. There's a little slide in there, and I think there's like this gladiator theming around there, like you're gonna battle the lions by going down the slide. I don't exactly know, but it's really cute and cool for the kids. I didn't really fit down the slide, so I didn't take it, but yeah, you can see the fencing going all the way around quite up close, and yeah, more viewing points down here. And after you leave this area, you come over here where you can get a bit of a look at the backstage access, which is always interesting. But that's it for Amersfoort. Let's move on to Antwerp, where the first view you get is this top-down view. You can see how these glass overhangs allow you a bit more to see into the enclosure, but you can also just lean over it a little bit. As you continue walking on, you get onto this really cool looking bridge that gives you an even better view from above. You can also see how the fences are constructed there for the separation area, where sometimes the male or someone else will be separated from the rest. There's more of these outposts, and there you can see just how cool that bridge actually looks. It's like this faux log with these branchy like railings going over the top. Over here we can also see how the moat is this nice faux rock work, and yeah, from the main viewing point over here looking up into the enclosure, it looks super cool, nice and lush, lots of faux rock, a little waterfall, all sorts of things, and then these lion statues as well. Really cool. Next up is Artis. First we're going to look at the old enclosure, because up until pretty recently this was what they had. So there was this small indoor area with a nice rock for them to lie on, and then this was the enclosure, and it's definitely very small, and I'm very glad that this was finally changed. This is a very old enclosure. It was a listed building. It was a monument for this zoo, because this was one of the first enclosures for lions that did not have any like fence or cage, but just a moat separating it from the visitor. So very iconic look, but it has now been replaced with this, or well, I say replaced, but this is actually a different part of the zoo. Something else got replaced with this. And yeah, this is the enclosure. I'm a big fan of the kind of spiky things in the water. I really love it when zoos do that. We'll see that a bunch more in this video. I'm also a huge fan of the fence of this enclosure. I think it looks very visually interesting. The backstage over here, not as interesting as the old one. I'm missing some of that cool rockwork and stuff. And then also over here, this is kind of a tunnel going through the enclosure in a way. I'm just not a big fan of all of this concrete. It's a style that they chose, I guess. I'm not sure why exactly, because I just don't think it looks all that good. Again, over here we've got a nice viewing point on top of that tunnel, where you can see where the lions can go over the visitors in a way. There's also a little backstage holding on top of the actual backstage, and over here we can see a little river flowing into this waterfall. Definitely really cool viewing point over there, where it looks more natural and cool. I also love this view from the tunnel. It's definitely very nice. Over here we can see a bit of a remnant of what used to be here, which was a really cool canyon thing. I hope I get to show it in some other video sometime, because I'm kind of missing it. I don't think that what it got replaced by over here is that much of an improvement. It's definitely an improvement for the lions, but from a visitor perspective, I think it's a bit of a downgrade. What I just especially don't like as we move into the playground over here, where we can get this frontal view of the enclosure, I just don't like how you're looking right onto that tunnel viewing point. It creates this very straight edge, this dark area, that is just not that great in my opinion. It should have been hidden better, I guess. But that was it for Artis. Let's move on to the Beekse Bergen, where we have 4 habitats to look at. It's absolutely crazy. We're starting off over here at the Safari Resort, where you can sleep between the animals, and there are 2 enclosures over here. So this is the first one. I will say these are the most amazing enclosures in general. They got the job done, but it feels like someone was just told, hey, we need a lion enclosure for the resort. So they threw in a moat and put up some fences, and here it is. Like, it's just a flat bit of land with some perches for the lions, some logs, some things for them to give them some enrichment. But other than that, there is not much in terms of design. It's just, you've got houses and you've got lions, and the moat is pretty well done. You get very great views from the houses, which is the entire point. But other than that, it's nothing too special. Over here there is a little viewing tower which only puts you further away from the animals, like you can see them better just from the ground. So it's a bit weird, but still really, really cool. And over here we're moving into the actual zoo. This is the first lion enclosure, kind of near the entrance, which is absolutely awesome. I love the way that it protrudes forward like this kind of peninsula over here with the Jeep. The Jeep is always a fantastic sight. The lions love to lay on it. It's just a very iconic look for the Beekse Bergen. So when the zoo built their new black rhino area, the visitor path got moved so that you have this new viewpoint over here. You used to walk on the other side of the enclosure, actually going upwards and looking down from above, but that has been altered. So over here we've got the second enclosure, kind of in the middle of the zoo. There is this lion enclosure, which is even cooler in my opinion. I love how the terrain goes like right up to the glass, and the lions are even higher up than the visitors are, so you really get to be impressed by them in a way. Also, the way that the terrain is laid out, it looks like the cars are actually still part of the enclosure. It looks like they're driving through, but they're actually separated, and I think that's a great little trick of the mind. I often hear people say like, huh, are the cars actually in the enclosure? But no, that isn't the case. Also, the rockwork in the middle there is super cool. It's just an awesome look. You can also go on the other side of the enclosure. There is this viewing point. This is kind of on the way to the resort, so it gives people from the resort something to look at while they're walking towards the zoo, I suppose. But yeah, here you can look kind of down and just see how much space they have. It was way back in the day, it was actually the case that you could drive through this enclosure, and I think these fences over here are actually like super old, because they look very different than the type of fencing you would see nowadays in this type of zoo. They kind of have a different style now. But yeah, this is also part of the car safari, so over here you can see how that works, and you can see that kind of hidden fence down there in the moat. Super awesome. Anyway, next up, Animalier de Bouillon. We've got a simple lion enclosure. I mean, what do we expect from Bouillon? Yeah, we've got a little perch over there, but other than that, not a lot of space. There is some elevation change, which is neat, but it's kind of weird because you're just looking down onto it instead of, like, that would be a cool elevation change if you were looking from the bottom up, but that's not the case. So next up, Bergen Zoo. Very similar to the cheetah enclosure that we saw in the cheetah video. We've got just a very large field and some lions in there. This is actually, Bergen Zoo also used to have a safari, car safari type thing where you could also drive through the lion enclosure, but definitely not anymore nowadays. It's not even a safari park anymore. But I'm not sure if these habitats are actually still a remnant of that. They might be. But yeah, that was it for Bergen. Next up we have Dierenrijk, which has a pretty special thing going on that we haven't seen yet. But overall, this enclosure, I think it's pretty good. It's not the biggest one, but I love the way that the fences are all overgrown like this. It creates a super cool vibe. And there's also these viewing points that kind of protrude into the enclosure, giving you really great views. But yeah, what is special about Dierenrijk is what you can see over here. They have a bachelor group of lions. So no males and females, no, just a couple of males, just a couple of bros chilling in a lion enclosure. And yeah, here is a nice overview of it once more. But that's it for Dierenrijk, so let's move on to the Zoo of Dortmund. Dortmund has a pretty interesting enclosure. It has a couple of different yards so they can separate lions if need be. Over here you can see kind of this path going from the backstage to this yard over here, and you're kind of walking through that. You can get really close up to all the fences and stuff. Over here you can see the lion house. It's a pretty cool design. Over there you can see the kind of gates that go from the indoor holding to the outdoor part, and you can actually see the indoor holding, which is not something we have not yet seen in this video. So that's always really, really awesome to see. I love to see where the animals sleep and what all of that looks like. You'll see a peafowl roaming around over there. But yeah, this is the second yard over here with a bunch of viewing points, these large windows. In the morning they were very fogged up, so I had to come back here in the afternoon to actually get this footage. But yeah, pretty cool enclosure. And then one more viewing point over here through the water where you can have a bit of an unobstructed view, and then this really interesting glass over there. Anyway, next up, Zoo-Duisburg. And the first viewing point we see is this moated viewing point where we can see the lions nicely walking around. They've got some climbing structures, they got some rocks, there's this rustic stone wall in the back, but also some more regular fences, tons of viewing points. Also looks like there's a viewing point from the indoor area, but that was closed when I was there, so I wasn't able to see what that all looks like. I'm guessing there's also indoor viewing for their backstage holding in there, but yeah, I couldn't see any of it. As you keep walking further around, there's also this point which I thought was really cool with the fountain there, and yeah, you can see more of the fences over here. Also some of these viewing points where you can get nice and up close and see that it's actually a pretty nice and large enclosure, and we can see another jeep. It's not just a Beekse thing, obviously it's not the most creative thing, but whenever I see a jeep in an enclosure I think of the Beekse. I guess that's just me. Anyway, over here in GaiaZoo we have another enclosure that is beautifully lush and overgrown around the fences and stuff. Very, very cool looking over there. There's also a little staircase that brings us up to an elevated viewing point where we can get a beautiful overview of the enclosure right here. Very nice, very, yeah, just lush. It's so beautiful. I'm really glad I was here during this time of the year where it was this lush. Also a very awesome kind of authentic looking telescope and a jeep that like goes through the glass, so you got this kind of immersion effect over here with the jeep. Super, super cool. It's kind of like the picnic bench we saw in the bear video, but then yeah, with an actual jeep, which is a bit more impressive, I suppose. But yeah, just more of these overgrown fences, a bit of a sheltered viewing area over here. What's also fun to mention about GaiaZoo is that they actually have a Somali lion over here, on top of having generic lions, so lions where they don't really know what's in their DNA anymore. Yeah, most zoos have generic lions. It's actually pretty rare to see a zoo that has something specific, so that was really cool to notice. Anyway, over here in Dierenpark Hoenderdaell, this is the first of the lion rescues that we're going to be looking at in this episode. So the enclosures are not amazing by any means, but these lions are coming from much, much worse situations and are just held here to live out the rest of their lives in a way that's as nice for them as possible. The Zoo/Lion Foundation, because that's actually what this is. This is kind of a non-profit thing, the Lion Foundation, Stichting Leeuw. They do their very best to keep the lions and other big cats that they have here. They also have tigers, panthers, cougars. They tried their best to keep them enriched, and a big part of that is what we're currently entering in this building, which, by the way, is super themed. I don't know, I was not expecting theming like this, but this is kind of what it's all about over here. This is the hunting simulator. So there's these cables hanging over this pretty beautiful enclosure that can be moved, kind of like a 3D printer does. They move this thing all across the room, and they hang some meat on that little hook, and that gets moved all around the room, and it encourages the big cats to chase after the meat all across the enclosure and simulate kind of hunting behavior. But as we're walking around that room, we're seeing so many cool interactive or just educational displays over here about the origins of these tigers, about the issues that they face. We just saw a little classroom where you could participate in a quiz about big cats. Now we're walking into this kind of tent type area where you can read up on all of the inhabitants of the Lion Foundation. Over here we see more of the hunting simulator. Over there we get pretty up close to the thing that they attached me to. This thing I thought was super, super interesting. It really, it's this simulation of what these animals have had to endure. So you're in this tiny cage over here with kids banging on the bars. I thought it was super creative, and it definitely made me feel very uncomfortable standing in there. So I thought it was really, really awesome. And yeah, it just really makes you feel for these big cats that are held in such awful conditions. So yeah, you walk all the way around, just more educational things over here about the habitats of these animals, really trying to teach you something. And then over here there's a little hotel area where you can see all of the inhabitants of the Lion Foundation. They all have a little key to their rooms in the hotel, I suppose. So yeah, really, really cool building. I really wanted to take my time to show this one because there's so much cool stuff to see there. Anyway, next up we have Monde Sauvage, where we have a decent enclosure, I guess. It's not the biggest one. I especially think it could have used a bit more height. Not necessarily because the lions use that height, but right now it just feels very claustrophobic, this enclosure, right? It has some nice elements with the rocks, and there's a little perch for the lions and stuff, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of this one in particular. But anyway, next up we have Mondo Verde. And I will say, when I first visited the zoo, I was not a huge fan of this enclosure, but honestly, I have seen worse. In general, I do feel like this zoo should get rid of either the lions or the tigers and give either space to the other animal. What's also not great here is that there's like a roller coaster thing right across from their enclosure, so not the most peaceful life these lions are leading there. But anyway, over here we have the Allwetterzoo Münster, where we also have not the biggest of enclosures over there, and we'll see a bit more of that later. But first we're gonna walk alongside, because over here there's also some outdoor cages. and I hate using that word, but how else are you going to describe this, right? This is just, they're outdoor holding. It's a bit themed. It feels, I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of this enclosure either. I think it's for obvious reasons, right? But I will say, as you come to the indoor part over here, there's a bunch of enclosures for other animals like Fusa, there's some bats, but there's also the indoor yards for the lions over here. And I will say that this is a really awesome indoor holding. There's lots of space for the animals to even be together in, lots of perches, things for them to climb on. This lion even climbed on top of this thing over here, which is really cool to see. But yeah, the outdoor yard just could be a bit bigger. It gives me old Artis vibes almost. It looks bigger because there's like more moat around it, but that's not space the lions can use. So yeah, let's just move on. Over here we have Natuurhulpcentrum Opglabbeek, or the Nature Help Center. This is another rescue. Over here I just wanted to show this cool educational display on like how animal rescues might look like, how the animals are transported. And then over here we have one of two lion enclosures. Again, they're not the biggest or the best, but I can definitely tell that these zoos try to keep these animals enriched for the time being while they're here, because this is definitely not a permanent solution. These lions are actually rescues from the war in Ukraine. They were being illegally held as pets in Ukraine and were seized by the Ukrainian government, but when the bombings got too close, they needed to find a new place for them. So via Poland, they ended up in here, and now they're being held here until there is space for them elsewhere. They're going to be sent to a proper zoo or something like that. It's super nice they were able to be rescued like that, and I really hope all ends well for them. But yeah, over here we are in the zoo of Osnabrück, where we can see a really cool water feature kind of on the side of this lion enclosure. Also this really cool bit of rock work over here. Definitely a striking enclosure with the rocks and how we're on the side of a hill. This entire zoo is kind of on the hillside, so that's also why we're going on this elevated pathway right now, because we need to gradually slope ourselves up instead of going too steep on the hillside. I love the backstage buildings shape over there as well on the back. It's really cool looking. The rustic walls, the faux baobab over there in the center, and then this awesome little stream. You can also see over here the fences, and then there's a little backstage holding over there in the back. After a while of walking through the zoo, you also get to the backside of this, and here you see that the building is actually not a complete circle. It's kind of a semicircle, half circle. Really quite an interesting shaped building right there. The windows were kind of difficult to look through. I'm not sure if that's on purpose. Maybe they need a little bit of cleaning. But yeah, you can also see even more of their backstage over here. It's very clean on the inside, not very themed, but yeah, for the animals, that doesn't matter, of course. So next up we have Ouwehands Dierenpark, and we are in this kind of playground area. The upper part of the playground was closed when I was here. I'm not sure exactly why, but yeah, from here you can have a beautiful view of this beautiful lion enclosure. I do really like the rockwork in the back. I like the lushness of the exhibit. It's just very, very good. Another cool thing about this exhibit is that we have white lions. That is a pretty special thing to see. I really do enjoy it. We also saw white lions at Mondo Verde actually, but I had more stuff to say and it was a very short clip, so I didn't have time to point it out. But yeah, on the back side of this enclosure you can also have some views through these rock walls, through these windows here, which gets you even closer to these perches of the lions, and you get some beautiful views of them here as well. But that's pretty much it for Ouwehands, so let's move on to Pairi Daiza, where we've got this thing. It's unique. I don't know how to describe it. All these posts, spiky posts. There's also this lion-shaped bee hotel that is actually pretty cool, and this fence that's built up out of these like metal cable spiky things. It's pretty interesting, I suppose, for the viewing area. The exhibit itself is a flat field with some logs and some bushes, and that's yeah. From up here, the exhibit is not something too spectacular. We do once again have those spiky things in the water, like we saw at Artis as well. I'm a big fan of that. That's what separates the lions from the hyenas. And yeah, over here, from the down point of view, the exhibit looks a lot better from here, in my opinion. Like from above, it just looks very flat, but from over here, it's a lot more interesting to look at, if you ask me. Over here we can get close up to the fence as well, so you can see how that is built up. But that is it for Pairi Daiza, so let's move on to Pakawi Park. We actually have two exhibits to look at in this zoo, so let's start with the African lion. We have a beautiful water feature over there, and this mess. it's not great, is it? What baffles me about this enclosure is how low the walls are, like compared to anything I've seen. I've never seen anything like this for lions. Such a short fence and short wall. Over there, of course, there is a bit of a moat, so it makes sense that the lions can't really jump out over there. But even just around the entire enclosure, there's some hot wire, some overhang, but I honestly did not feel safe. I don't know. I don't know what lions are capable of, but in any zoo I've seen, the fence is like twice as tall as here. So I don't know about that. But then we also have white lions over here in Pakawi, very respectfully being treated by the patrons over there. This is their enclosure. It's slightly better. This one does have a very tall fence, or at least a taller fence. Compared to the other one, and I don't know why they would choose to do it here but not there. No idea. But yeah, it's a sand pit with a bunch of trees in it. It's not great still, but slightly better. Again, I've seen worse at this point, so it's like bad zoos are making even Pakawi look good by comparison. Well, not good, but you know what I mean. Anyway, Wildlands time. Probably one of my favorite lion exhibits over here. Just look at the detail in the kopje rocks and these viewing points. We've also got a nice little cave inside of the kopje rocks over there, where the lions are chilling and hiding from the rain probably. And from the earlier viewing point when we just arrived at this area, you could see the Jongola jungle building kind of sticking out behind the hill over here, but from the main viewing point, because you're closer to the hill, you don't actually see this stuff behind it, so it just beautifully immerses you in this landscape, and it works super well. Of course, not from every viewpoint. I think in a second we'll see it stick out again. But overall, I think it works really well. Yeah, there you can see the building kind of sticking out behind it. But overall, it works super well. From one of my favorites to another one of my favorites over here in the Zoo of Wuppertal, we are climbing up this here tower where we get a view of this beautiful hilltop. This is one of the main reasons I want to revisit this zoo in the summer, because I just cannot imagine how beautiful this must look when everything is all lush and overgrown. They've just got such a massive stretch of land. We also got some binoculars, obviously, because this is a very large exhibit. But yeah, and then these massive pieces of faux rock with the windows in there. Just, I love everything about this. This is such a cool enclosure, and I love it. I haven't even seen what it looks like in its prime, right? But I can already imagine it will just be amazing. So we also have this tunnel over here, which will lead us further into the enclosure. So the lions would actually be able to pass over us there. And now we are kind of more inside of the enclosure in this field. So we can get closer views of the lions if they do decide to kind of hang out here. There's even a skylight, so there might even be a lion on top of you. I don't know how often that would happen, but just the thought that it could is so cool to me. And that's still not all. As we pass the kind of fence over here, we even get to a unobstructed view. No fence, no glass, just this open view with the moat. In the distance you can actually see that rock that we were inside with all the windows. Yeah, it's just absolutely awesome. And then even more of this amazing faux rock over here, inside of which is their backstage, even more binoculars as well. And you can go into those rocks, into this cave, to see some of their backstage holding over here. So this is kind of a outdoor separation yard. You can also see some fences in there if you kind of duck under the glass, and there's even more of that around here. There's also a TV showing you the indoor quarters. Very, very modern TV, as you can tell. But yeah, here you can see some of their indoor area, and it's just beautifully themed and rocked, and it just baffles me. This is such a great enclosure. And there's even more cool stuff, because we're now moving on to Zoom Erlebniswelt. Really, all the good stuff is in the back here. So we've got this enclosure which is just so well immersed into this landscape. You've got a little moat in front and then another moat with some hot wire keeping the lions out, but you can barely see that stuff. You have the lions over there, then you have zebras over there, and I don't think I even noticed this while I was filming, but you can also see a hyena walking there. So we've got 3 animals in one view over here, and it's just freaking amazing. I absolutely love that so much. What an awesome enclosure. And then over here we get to the indoor area, like a little stream running over there. But over here we have the indoor area, so we've got even more of this rockwork. Definitely Erlebniswelt rockwork if we compare this to what we saw in the bear video. It was all very similar, but I would say over here it's even better, especially when you look at this part. You know, in the bear stuff, if you watched that video, I complained that all of the windows were like very square inside of these rocks, but over here they have a little bit more shape to them. You know, it's pretty good. And then there's even a door hidden in the rockwork over there as well. But that's it for Zoom Erlebniswelt. Now let's move on to Zoopark Overloon, where this exhibit might be a little bit familiar. I feel like it has very similar elements to what we've already seen at both the Beekse Bergen and also a little bit of Dierenrijk with this glass viewing point over here. But yeah, this kind of viewing point is just very Beekse Bergen to me, and it will get even worse. As we can see another Jeep over there in the distance. Yeah, I already told you, like, when I see a Jeep like that, I just think of the Beekse Bergen, but a Jeep like that inside of a lion enclosure in a zoo that is owned by the same company, suspicious. I don't know. And also this elevated viewing point is just like what the Beekse Bergen used to have. So these enclosures were just so similar to me, which is why I always wasn't a huge fan of it. It didn't really have its own identity. Over here you can see I just switched it from like one day in the summer to another day in the summer. You can see how much the weather affects what an enclosure looks like. Like, there was almost no grass and now there is. You can also see in the background we have African wild dogs running over there. So there's a cool kind of cohesion, African savanna feeling over there. If you're doing the night safari or the dusk safari, whatever it's called, you actually get to feed the lions, or at least you get to witness the lions being fed by your fellow tour mates, if you are not the one throwing the meat. Yeah, still a really good looking enclosure. I like it, but just in terms of other stuff from the same company, it's not that unique. But those were all the African lions. Let's move on to some Asiatic lions as well. So we are in Blijdorp, in the Africa area. Wait, didn't I just say these were Asiatic lions? Yeah, no, Blijdorp does something really cool in that they use the lions as kind of a bridge between the Asia area and the Africa area. Of course, because these are Asiatic lions, they kind of fit in the Asia area, but also how are you going to have an Africa area without lions? You know, I feel like that's kind of the decision that they made, like use them for both, and I think it works pretty well. It's pretty cool. We can see their backstage. We can see here we're indeed entering the Africa area. Yeah, we had the base camp viewing points, which were all really cool, and then over here we've got some more viewing points just through the mesh, and there is another really cool one over here where you're entering this truck, which is on a safari. On the video screen you can see the safari trip or whatever, but yeah, from the truck you also can look into the exhibit over here and see more of the lions. And then on the other side of the enclosure there is this viewing point with a small grandstand. I guess they might do feedings over here in the past, maybe they still do, I don't know. And then we got this super iconic twin building over here, which has had many purposes over the years. I think it also used to be a giraffe stall at some point, other stuff, but now it is the indoor area for the lions. And you can see there's beautiful rockwork, murals, you've got more views into the enclosure from here as well. And there is also access to some more backstage behind this kind of faux rock wall over there. You can see two little gates, and that goes into the backstage, which is actually hidden inside of this little wooden structure type thing, and on the other side of that is also a backstage holding that is outdoor, where they can separate individuals if need be. So that was it for Blijdorp. Next up we have the Zoo of Cologne, which also has a pretty nice looking enclosure. They've got some nice elevation changes, some good looking faux rock, and they're part of this larger kind of big cat area. The tigers are on one side, the other side next to it you can see the leopard with the big arch holding up the netting over there. But yeah, the enclosure itself is pretty good. I love these murals over here, I will say. But yeah, over here there's a small window just to get you a bit closer up to the animals. But that's all I've got for Cologne. Moving to Zoo de Maubeuge, where we have a nice, small, cute little viewing point over here into the lion enclosure. It's not the biggest, but I think it suffices for what it's worth. You've got a couple of viewing points, a nice little perch made out of rocks, and then another sheltered viewing point over here with bears on one side and then the lions on this side. I do like their little backstage over there. It's a cute little building, got some small details on there, and you can see one of the lions kind of chilling in front of it. But yeah, not the biggest enclosure, but not too bad. Then lastly we're gonna wrap it up with the Zoo of Planckendael, where we've got these beautiful viewing areas and then a still pretty good enclosure, I would say. It's a little bit on the flat side. The terrain itself could be a bit more interesting. They did create these nice shelters out of the rock that they can also perch on top of, which they do. And the shoreline of the enclosure is pretty nice and curved and varied, and the backside is as well. So it's definitely not boring or anything. And I do especially love this effect over here, where the visitor path continues on into the enclosure like that. So as you're walking up to it, it looks connected. Only when you get really close you see that there is actually the moat in between, of course. So that is just an awesome thing that Planckendael does a lot of, and I always really enjoy. And yeah, as you continue walking along the train track, you can also see there's a safety buoy that they have wherever there's a big body of water. They have one of these in this zoo. I don't see that very often in other zoos, but here they do. But that's all I had to show for Planckendael. That's all I had to show for lions in general. So I hope you enjoyed, got some lion inspiration out of this. Have fun building your lion habitats. Enjoy this cute little lion cub over here having a snack. If you want to have your name featured on this screen, become a member and you will also get early access to videos. You basically get to see them as soon as I upload them, instead of having to wait for the Wednesday or the Saturday or whenever I decide to release them. Other than that, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!